If there are 4 enemies down and your entire team is up, take Rayquaza. You will win. Period. End of story. You win the game. Period. Period. Oh, Jake, what if they steal Rayquaza? It doesn't matter. There is one of them. They will get 1 shield. Move on. 4 enemies down. Your team is up. Take Rayquaza. Almost, no matter what. You could be up by 900 points, and I would still recommend you do this. You could be up by 905 points, and you still should do this. Full disclosure, this just happened to me in a match a few matches ago, and I'm still upset about it. Long story short, we stopped ripping long enough for Rayquaza to start getting some health back. At that point, Umbreon and multiple allies are now back up. They come in and steal, and now 4 of them have shields, and they win the game. A game that we were already up, and up more because our Dragapult, you know, Dragapult, curiously good at securing objectives and ripping them. Dragapult decided to walk off and score. Now, I know what you may be saying, but Jake, I don't like to win. I like to lose. Well, I can't help you. But for everyone else, seriously, I need you to think about it. If you have the ability to take Rayquaza off the map, and the worst thing that could possibly happen is 1 enemy gets a Rayquaza shield, that is worth it every single time. There really isn't a time that's not worth it. Honestly, you could be up by a lot and that is still worth it. I wish I had another way to say it was still worth it, but it's still worth it. Breathe, Jake. Breathe. No, you're right, Jake. No, I know I'm right. Okay. I think this whole thing boils down to this concept that not a lot of people actually understand what their win condition is inside of a match of Pokemon Unite and what your opponent's win condition is inside of a match of Pokemon Unite. So imagine that you're already up. You could be up by a lot. If there's just a couple enemies down, you really don't need to start securing Rayquaza. You can continue looking for KOs. Maybe someone can backcap and continue to extend your lead. But once a majority of the enemy team is down, you're actually not only setting yourself up to win if you're already winning, or setting yourself up to win if you're behind, you're also taking away your opponent's largest win condition in the game, which is to somehow get Rayquaza with enough allies of theirs up to score and win. Near the end of a match of Unite, I think it's important to notice how you can win this game, what can actually happen to win. Some games are so close that someone can peel off and score, and you can win the game that way. The unfortunate thing that happens a lot of the time is I think people don't realize how much time is on the clock, and they make a decision like that, not recognizing that a minute and a half is still on the clock. You have time for your opponents to respawn, come back into the fight, and win. And something I think a lot of people also don't notice, let's say your team does really well at the start of a Ray fight. You KO 3 or 4 enemies, you kind of start steamrolling and pushing towards their goals. What has often happened, not always, but happens a lot of the time, is the enemies have actually lost a fight and not used a Unite move. This happens a ton, and I'm sure it's happened to you. You go into a fight, you just get boom, 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 stunned, stunned, stunned. All of a sudden, you just got KO'd without using your Unite move. However, if your opponents give you enough time to respawn and fully set up a refight inside of a match of Pokemon Unite, now all of a sudden you're coming back to that match with a Unite move, and they may not have a Unite move. One of the worst things you can do when you're winning is just calmly do nothing. It's really one of the worst things you can do. Now, of course, I'm not saying one enemy goes down and you have to rip Ray. That's a mistake. There are many enemies up that can still secure it. What I am saying is, when you've KO'd a lot of valuable targets on your opponent's team, it's time for you to take away a win condition from your opponents. And I think that's a really good thing to think about all the time. Win condition. What is your win condition? How do you actually win this game? And if you start thinking about that more, I think you'll start making better decisions as your match goes on. You'll recognize, oh, this Regieleki means nothing to us right now. We're already behind, and I think the better thing to do is meet my opponents at Rayquaza. Let me talk to you about this exact thought process that some players I think seem to be missing. Essentially, you're right around the 2-minute mark. You're like 2 minutes 20 seconds, 2 minutes 30 seconds, something like that. Your opponents take Regieleki and it starts marching towards your top goal. Now, if you look at the opposing team and you see that they have any Pokemon that can rip, an auto attacker, Cinderaces, Decidueyes, Duraludons, things like that, you know right away, if your team doesn't show up to Rayquaza, honestly, even if your team does show up to Rayquaza, they could start ripping that instantly no matter what. So you have to show presence. Right there, I think you just have to basically let that Regieleki walk unless multiple enemies are KO'd. Because the win condition for this match is making sure they don't rip Rayquaza before you can even show up. Now let's say you're already behind. I mean, considerably behind. At this point, I think you just have to leave Regieleki, move on, go towards the center, try to win a big fight, catch your opponents off guard with some big Unite moves, and take Rayquaza for your own. You're already quite a bit behind. And in fact, sometimes when Regieleki goes into a top goal, one of your opponents will peel off to go score there, and if your team is all together, you can take a 5v4 and actually win the game that way. Again, it's all about win condition right here. In a coordinated 5-stack, this isn't exactly the case, right? Because there's a lot more communication between you and your allies. Even if one of your allies goes off to score and gets KO'd, you can make sure that your team doesn't engage in a bad fight. But in all other forms of play inside Pokemon Unite, there's just not enough communication to be able to stop a really bad moment from turning into a much worse moment if your opponents or if your team can capitalize on it. Oftentimes, a match boils down to who wins Rayquaza. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but basically the game has been building to this moment, and if one team is not able to fight the other team, they lose right there. And if they don't KO anybody on the enemy team, they take Ray, they score, and that's the end of it. And for this reason, I think the decisions you make around Rayquaza are extremely important. You just have to start recognizing as quickly as you can how to win this match. What is the thought process behind the actions you are taking? What is the why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it getting you closer to a win condition? Is it taking a win condition away from your opponents? If the answer is no, then you need to reconsider what this play is doing for your team. I think a basic rule of thumb, again, that I mentioned at the start of the video, if all of your opponents are down, first off, just take Ray. If 4 of your opponents are down, there are very, very few situations I would say to not take Ray in. Your team would have to be decimated. It would have to be a full health enemy, and most of you are just a couple hits away from getting KO'd or something like that. But in general, that moment where you catch your opponents, you KO a ton of them, just take the objective off the map. Just end it right there, because even if one enemy gets it, it's just one Pokemon with one shield. That's it. So here are some situations this would not apply in. Again, as I mentioned before, a few of your teammates are down or you're at extremely low health. Your team has no rip because your Cinderace, has already been KO'd and it's just a Slowbro or something left. If you don't have enough teammates left to do it, then yeah, you can't rip. Or if for whatever reason the way the KOs have been chained on the enemy side, by the time you start ripping, 3 of your opponents will be back. They have KO timers under 5 seconds or something like that, maybe even under 10 seconds if it's getting really, really kind of close and you don't have great rip. At that point, okay, I understand not taking Rayquaza. But you do have to realize something. The time you are giving your opponents is time for them to respawn, farm experience, get Unite moves back, and you have to do this Ray fight all over again. So near the end, if you're looking for a win, you're kind of really looking for one of two things. You're looking to continuously chain KOs on your opponents while at the same time being ahead enough in score where you recognize that you can win. So what this looks like is 2 opponents are down, you know where the rest of them are, you can pick another one off, boom, now 3 are down, okay, 1 comes off respawn, you can pick off another one, and you start to kind of slowly KO them, and you don't need to take Rayquaza, and you never end up getting a huge advantage where all, 4 are down at one time. That's a fine way to win a match. But otherwise, you are probably winning a match because you win a fight and take Rayquaza. I don't know the numbers, and I actually would be super curious to find this out. But I would wager the team that takes Rayquaza wins 85% of their games. That might even be too low. I honestly think most of the time a team takes Rayquaza, they win a match. Maybe 80% is a fair number. So if you have an opportunity to take Rayquaza, and you have the unlikely shot that your opponent is going to steal it, and even if they do, they just get a shield, I'm begging you. For me, for you, for everyone out there, take Rayquaza. I love you. Yeehaw to you and yours. Have a good night.